Daniel Dillon, The Phantom Client, written by Tane Blackadder, read by Arthur Howard. The city was baking. A relentless late summer heat had clamped down on the streets, turning the pavement into a shimmering griddle, and the air in Mel's griddle into a thick, soupy haze that even the ancient air conditioner couldn't cut. The usual scent of grease and coffee was underscored by the smell of hot vinyl and human sweat. It was a different kind of oppression than our customary rain. This was a slow, simmering pressure cooker, and it put everyone on edge. Daniel was restless. He'd been stirring the same cup of black coffee for 10 minutes, the rhythmic clink of the spoon against the ceramic mug, a monotonous counterpoint to the low hum of the diner. The heat seemed to amplify the silence that had settled between him and Sarah since the Thorne case. The rescue of Anna Thorne from her husband's betrayal had been a victory, but it was the kind that left a residue, a reminder of how close the darkness could get to home. Sarah was reading a medical journal, but her gaze was distant, and I noticed she hadn't turned a page in a long time. The phone's ring was jarringly sharp in the lethargic atmosphere. It wasn't a desperate plea or a fearful whisper. It was clean, precise, almost mechanical. I picked it up. Dillon Investigations. There was a pause, then a voice, digitally altered, flat and without inflection, like something from a text-to-speech program. You are to Surveil David Craig, CEO of OmniStream Logistics. Routine due diligence. Report on his movements, his personal habits. A file has been sent to your encrypted server. Payment has been made. The line went dead. I looked at Daniel. Anonymous, digitally scrambled voice. Wants us to tail a businessman, David Craig. OmniStream Logistics. Says payment is already in our account. Daniel stopped stirring. His eyes, which had been clouded with a kind of listless heat, sharpened instantly. Anonymity was a red flag we'd learned not to ignore. It was the calling card of the Covenant, of the shadowy players behind the St. Luke's drug trials, of the architects of the statistical dead. But the money was always a powerful argument. I pulled up our accounts. A wire transfer for a substantial retainer, enough for 2 weeks of intensive work, had indeed cleared. It came from a holding company in the Caymans, a ghost address. It's a trap, Sarah said, not looking up from her journal. Her voice was quiet but certain. It's always a trap when they hide. Daniel gave a slow, single nod. But it's a paying trap. And I'm bored. He pushed his coffee away. Let's see what Mr. Craig is up to. For 2 weeks, David Craig was the most boring man in the city. Our phantom client had provided a detailed dossier. Age 48, divorced, workaholic, no criminal record, no obvious vices. Our surveillance confirmed it. He was a creature of impeccable, soul-crushing routine. His life was a closed loop between his sterile high-rise apartment, his corner office at OmniStream's gleaming tower, and a members-only athletic club. He didn't drink to excess, didn't gamble, didn't meet with suspicious characters. He was, as far as we could tell, exactly what he appeared to be, a successful, dull, and utterly predictable corporate executive. We filed sterile factual reports to the anonymous Dropbox provided by our client. Subject departed residence 7:15 a.m. Subject lunched at his desk. Subject returned residence 7:45 p.m. There was nothing to report. It felt like a waste of time, a pointless exercise. I started to think our phantom client was a paranoid business rival or a jealous spouse who'd gotten cold feet. Daniel, however, grew more tense with each passing day of normalcy. It's too clean, he muttered one evening in the booth, the heat finally beginning to break as dusk settled. It's like he's following a script. No one's this clean. Maybe he's just a boring guy, Daniel, I offered, wiping sweat from my forehead with a napkin. There are no boring guys, he replied, his gaze distant. Only guys with good hiding places. Remember Peter Claymore, the actuary? He looked boring too. On the 15th day, the script changed. It was a Thursday. Craig left work at his usual time, but didn't go home. Instead, his driver took him to the upscale King's Hotel. Daniel, tailing him, watched him enter. He didn't have a bag. He wasn't meeting anyone in the lobby. He went straight to the elevators. Daniel called me. He's at the King's. No reservation in his name. I can't get past the lobby. See what you can find. I was already diving in. I hacked into the King's hotel booking system, a frighteningly easy task given their lax security. I found it. A suite booked for one night under a corporate account, not OmniStream's. The account was traced to a shell company I'd never seen before, but the financial routing number had a familiar prefix, one I'd seen attached to the Endspiel account, the online chess bully who'd threatened Alexei Petrov. "Daniel," I said, my voice tight, "the suite is booked under a shell company. It's got fingerprints, the same kind from the Petrov case." There was a long silence on the other end. "He's not having an affair," Daniel said finally. "He's having a meeting." He decided to wait it out. He parked across the street, watching the hotel entrance. He saw nothing. Craig never came out. At 11:37 p.m., Daniel, exhausted and frustrated, called it a night. He filed his report to the phantom client. Subject deviated from routine. Visited King's Hotel, Suite 814, from 7:02 p.m. to present. Suite booked under Shell Corporation. It was the last report we ever sent. The next morning, David Craig was found dead in Suite 814. He had been bludgeoned to death with a heavy crystal hotel ashtray. The scene was messy, violent, personal, and it was a perfect frame. The first detective on my doorstep was Inspector Eva Rostova. She had a weary respect for Daniel, forged during the perfect alibi case when we'd helped her take down Alistair Finch. But today, her respect was buried under a mountain of cold, hard evidence. "Michael," she said, stepping into my apartment without being asked. Her face was grim. "We need to talk about your friend." "What about him?" "He was the last person to see David Craig alive. We have security footage of him entering the hotel lobby, loitering outside for hours. We have his car on traffic cam parked across the street. We have a witness who saw a man matching his description arguing with Craig in the hotel bar earlier that week. A confrontation we now know Daniel initiated to get a closer look at him." My blood ran cold. "That's circumstantial. He was working a case." "What case?" Rostova's eyes were like flint. "There's no record of a client, no contract. The retainer you received. It was wired from an account owned by a dummy corporation that was dissolved 6 months ago. The phone number used to contact you is a dead-end burner, now destroyed. From where I'm sitting, it looks like Daniel Dillon took a shadow job, had a confrontation with the mark, lost his temper and killed him." "That's insane," I said, but the dread was a physical weight in my stomach. The phantom client. The perfect, boring subject. The single suspicious deviation. The meeting in the hotel. It was all a stage meticulously set, and Daniel had walked right onto it. "It gets worse," Rostova said, her voice dropping. "The murder weapon, the ashtray, we found it, wiped clean, except for one perfect partial thumbprint. It belongs to Daniel." The world tilted. I stumbled back, leaning against my kitchen counter. This wasn't just a frame, it was a masterpiece. It had the cold, calculated precision of the alibi built for Philip Mason, but turned inward, aimed at us. "He needs to come in, Michael," Rostova said, "voluntarily, or this gets ugly fast." I found Daniel at a safe house he maintained, a dusty, anonymous studio apartment. He was sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the streetlights outside. He didn't look surprised to see me. "They're coming for you," I said, my voice raw. "I know." "The print, Daniel. How did they get your print?" He was silent for a long moment. "The confrontation at the bar," he said finally. "I bumped into him, spilled his drink. I helped him clean it up. He handed me his napkin. The ashtray was on the table. I must have touched it. It was so simple, so devastatingly clever. He'd been played. We'd all been played. Sarah arrived minutes later, her face pale but set in lines of fierce determination. "We have to move," she said. "Rostova will have a warrant soon." "If I run, I look guilty," Daniel said, his voice a low rumble in the dark room. "You are guilty," I shot back, the panic making me sharp. "In the eyes of the law, you're guilty. They have motive, a shadow job gone wrong. They have opportunity. You were there. They have physical evidence. Your print on the weapon. This isn't like the Sanderson case where the husband was obviously lying. This is airtight." "No," Sarah said, her voice calm but iron hard. She looked at Daniel, and in that look was everything they had become to each other. "It's not. Because we know he didn't do it. And that means someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like he did. We find out who and we find out why. It was the spark we needed. The hunter was cornered, but the hunt was back on. We became fugitives in our own city. Daniel couldn't go back to Mel's. He stayed in the safe house, a caged animal, while Sarah and I became his eyes and ears. The roles were reversed and the pressure was suffocating. My job was to find the phantom. I had to deconstruct the entire elegant frame. I started with the money, the retainer. I followed the digital ghost through the dissolved Cayman Corporation, through a series of encrypted transfers, through a maze of false fronts. It was like trying to grab smoke, but I kept hitting one recurring node, a digital waypoint that kept appearing in the architecture of the fraud. It was a server cluster, owned by a private security firm called Aegis Watch. Aegis Watch. The name meant nothing, but when I cross-referenced it with every case we'd worked, every name we'd encountered, I found a connection. Aegis Watch had been a minor, silent subcontractor on the security system for the Northwood Bioreclamation Facility, the memory theft clinic. They were in the ecosystem. Meanwhile, Sarah used her own network. She reached out to contacts from her nursing days, from the clinic where Anna Thorne had recovered. She was looking for a different kind of pattern, a human one. Who would want Daniel out of the way? The list, we knew, was long. The covenant was shattered, but its remnants were still out there. The people behind the St. Luke's trials. The organization that employed killers like Kagan. She came back to the safe house one evening, her expression grim. "I heard a whisper," she said, "from a nurse at St. Luke's who remembers Anna. She said after Anna was discharged, a man came asking questions, not a cop. He was polite, well-dressed. He was asking about the investigators who helped her. He was specifically asking about Daniel." "Description?" Daniel asked, his voice a low growl. "Average, forgettable." But she remembered his watch, a large, chunky digital watch with a bright green strap. The room went cold. The watch from Leo's drawings, the watch on the wrist of Kagan, the cleaner who'd come for the mute boy. "It's the same people," I breathed, "the same organization that killed Petrov. They're not just cleaning up loose ends from the drug trials. They're cleaning up the people who keep disrupting their operations. They're cleaning up us." The frame wasn't just about putting Daniel away for a murder. It was a strategic strike. They were removing their most persistent adversary. But knowing who wasn't enough. We needed proof. And we needed to understand why David Craig. Why was he the chosen pawn? Daniel, pacing the small room like a tiger, stopped dead. "The hotel," he said. "The meeting. Craig wasn't there for a meeting. He was the delivery boy." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "He went in clean, he came out dead. What did he bring in? What was so important he had to hand it over in person, in a hotel room?" Daniel's mind was racing, piecing it together. "OmniStream Logistics, what do they do?" I was already on my laptop. "They're a global freight company. Specialize in high-value, time-sensitive cargo, pharmaceuticals, tech components." "Biological samples," Sarah finished, her eyes widening. "For clinical trials." The pieces exploded into a new, terrifying configuration. OmniStream was the logistics arm. They were the ones physically moving the experimental drugs, the corrupted data, the payoffs. David Craig wasn't a random businessman. He was a key node. And he was meeting someone in that hotel to hand over something critical. The killer had been waiting for him. He'd taken whatever Craig was delivering, killed him, and then meticulously framed Daniel for it. Two birds with one stone. Our phantom client wasn't a person. It was the organization itself. They had hired us to tail their own man, to establish a pattern, to create a narrative that would lead directly to Daniel when the time was right. They had used us to build our own cage. "We need to get into OmniStream," Daniel said. "Craig's office. If he was handing something off, there has to be a record. A manifest, a shipping order, something that shows what was so important." It was a suicide mission, The police were watching his known associates. Rostova had a bolo out for him, but we were out of options. The plan was a desperate, three-pronged gamble. I would create a digital diversion, overloading the city's traffic camera network around the OmniStream tower with a cascade of false alerts. Sarah would be our lookout, stationed in a cafe across the street, her phone ready to send an abort signal. And Daniel, disguised in a delivery uniform we'd acquired, would breach the building and get into Craig's office. The night of the break-in, the heat had broken, replaced by a cool, tense stillness. My hands trembled as I executed the code, sending the camera system into a glitching frenzy. From my position in a van 2 blocks away, I watched on a split screen as Daniel, looking nothing like himself, walked calmly into the OmniStream lobby. "He's in," I whispered into the comms. "Clear so far," Sarah's voice came back, steady. Minutes ticked by like hours. The only sound was the frantic tapping of my keys and the ragged sound of my own breathing. I could feel the net closing around us. "Michael," Daniel's voice crackled in my ear. "He was in Craig's office. I'm in. His computer is locked down tight. Can you bypass it?" "Working on it." A pause, filled with the sound of his quiet movements. Then, "There's a safe, behind a painting, a small digital lock." My mind raced. Try the date of the King's Hotel meeting, or the suite number. People are creatures of habit. I heard the faint electronic beeps as he input the code. A soft click. "Got it," he breathed. Inside was a single unmarked USB drive and a small leather-bound ledger. "Get out, Daniel." "Now," Sarah's voice cut in, sharp with urgency. "Security just did a roll call at the front desk. They're suspicious." He was out of the office in seconds, melting back into the stairwell. We held our collective breath as he emerged from the building, got on his delivery bike, and disappeared into the night. Back at the safe house, we gathered around my laptop as I plugged in the USB drive. It contained one file, a shipping manifest. It listed a cargo of diagnostic equipment being routed through OmniStream's private airfield. The destination was a closed city, in a country with lax regulatory oversight. The client was listed by a code name, Janus. But it was the ledger that was the true gold mine. It was David Craig's private record, written in a neat, precise hand. It detailed years of illicit shipments, bribes, and covert payments, and on the last page, dated the day of his death, was a single, chilling entry. Final delivery, Janus Protocol, King's Hotel, 8 p.m., handoff to the architect. Payment, closure of the Dillon problem. We stared at the words. The Dillon problem. They saw him as a problem, and they had devised a final, elegant solution. Craig was delivering the Janus Protocol, and in return the organization was delivering Daniel's head on a platter. "We have it," I said, a wave of dizzying relief washing over me. "We have the proof. This exonerates you. It shows the frame." Daniel's face, however, was still grim. "It's not enough. It's circumstantial. A ledger we stole during an illegal break-in. They'll say I forged it. We need the architect. We need the man Craig was meeting." He was right. We had the what, but not the who. Without the other half of the meeting, the frame, while weakened, could still hold. It was Sarah who found the answer. She had been scouring the hotel's guest registry again, looking for anyone else who might have been in Suite 814. And she found it. A maid's report filed after the murder and buried in the digital paperwork. The maid stated that when she serviced the room before Craig's arrival, the minibar had been stocked. But when police searched it after the murder, 2 miniature bottles of bourbon were missing. "Craig didn't drink bourbon," Daniel said, his eyes lighting up. "I followed him for 2 weeks. He was a vodka man." The killer had been in the room before Craig. He'd let himself in, helped himself to a drink and waited. And he'd paid for it. The suite was on a corporate account, but the minibar was a separate charge, requiring a credit card imprint for incidentals. I was back on the hotel's system, my heart in my throat. I found the minibar charge for Suite 814. It had been billed to a credit card, a card registered to a man named Julian Croft. The name meant nothing, but his face when I pulled his driver's license photo was one I would never forget. It was the man from the security footage at the memory theft clinic, The calm, cold-faced orderly who had overseen the extractions. The architect. We had him. Daniel didn't go to Rostova, he went to the press. He arranged a meeting with a dogged investigative journalist who had been sniffing around the St. Luke's scandal. With the USB drive, the ledger, and the minibar receipt laid out, the story wrote itself. A sprawling conspiracy of corporate murder and corruption, with a PI being framed to cover it up. The story exploded. The DA's case against Daniel collapsed under the weight of the new evidence. The charges were dropped. Julian Croft, the architect, vanished before the police could arrest him, a ghost returning to the shadows. But the organization he worked for had been dealt a crippling blow. Their logistics were exposed, their methods revealed. A week later, we were back in our booth at Mel's. The heatwave had broken, and a cool, normal breeze drifted through the open door. The silence between us was different. The tension was gone, replaced by a weary, hard-won peace. Daniel looked at Sarah, and for the first time in weeks, a genuine, if tired, smile touched his lips. "You were right," he said. "It was a trap." "I'm getting good at spotting them," she replied, her own smile reaching her eyes. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. It wasn't a fleeting touch. It was a statement. An anchor. The phone rang. We all looked at it. The sound was no longer a threat, but a reminder. The phantom client was gone, but the city was still full of ghosts. Daniel gave her hand a brief, firm squeeze before letting go and standing up. He walked to the counter and picked up the receiver. "Dillon Investigations," he said, his voice calm and steady. The hunt was eternal, but we were ready.